Art of the Zodiac presents Talk.
Camera action.
Yes. So we were just discussing off camera. Hello, Mr. Travis Black, how this is the perhaps worst possible election time ever chosen for this talk.
Well, I have not seen the other charts of the other guests, but
for today, we picked a pretty bad time, is what you're telling me.
Well, we just picked a time because we live in a capitalist society based on things that they are electing for us, not ourselves. So, that being said, they know who they are. Yeah, it's Capricorn rising. Where's Saturn? Saturn's in the third in Pisces. Okay. But the ascendant squaring Mars, 6 degrees of Libra. The sun is squaring the moon and exactly squaring the moon and Mercury, and Venus is in the 8th. So Jupiter's in the 5th house of creativity, so maybe we have that on our side today. But otherwise, this is going to be a really laborious, irritating talk for somebody.
So if you're still listening...
Pluto is on the ascendant, so things might get interesting. Or
I think they will get interesting. It's you. I was thinking about this conversation, and like I was like, do I prepare notes? And I'm like, talking to Travis Black, like I could spend like an hour just like introducing him. This is going to be a nice conversation because I feel like any time you talk, it gets fun.
It's true. I do have a very long middle name. But yeah, what are we talking about? I don't even know. I mean, we could talk about so many things.
Well, I mean, I do have some jumping off points. I didn't have like, particular questions like an agenda, but I do have some talking points. First off, I was thinking, how beautiful is it that on the day of the Mercury Cazimi, right, barring this particular time, that I get to be speaking to you, someone who I believe is to be the avatar of Mercury in all of their best qualities. You are a bit of a benevolent trickster. You are kind. You are humorous. You are prolific. I'm really honored to spend this day with you.
Wow, you're really feeding my Cazimi over here with all these compliments and, reflecting on what my ego has unleashed in the world.
Well, you're also an astrologer, so do you want to take the moment to describe what Mercury Cazimi is for people who are listening that may not be astrologers?
Yeah. So Mercury Cazimi. Well, I'm looking at the chart.
Are we? Did we move degrees? Have I not paid attention?
I want to see when the actual
okay
Cazimi is.
Oh, the sun moved. Okay, sun. So we just passed it.
Yeah, we just passed it. I'm seeing when it was. Yes. No, this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed it. Cazimi, when Mercury is conjunct the sun, and it's in the heart of the sun, and it kind of goes, I like to think of it as a planet kind of going through a storm, getting burnt up, or getting kind of beaten by the storm, the solar storm, like a hurricane, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the eye of the storm, and then that's the Cazimi. It's kind of all calm again, and it's just this kind of like detente between the two planets, just kind of like hi. in the still quiet space, just able to kind of really focus their energies towards one another and find ways of interlacing, and then they're ripped apart again into the storm, and on the other side, getting burnt up again for several more degrees, and then it's at some point they'll station direct, and they'll return and do the same thing on the other side of the sun. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. I'll also add that it's when it's this sort of pivotal point when Mercury transitions from evening star to morning star, which I really love, right? There's that moment of like, okay, there's hope again, perhaps. We are starting a new cycle.
Yeah, I find that the evening star in my practice seems to kind of relate to, or evening versus morning star seem to
Yeah.
relate to kind of what people are anxious about.
Ooh.
What did I say last night? What did I do? What should I do have done? Versus morning star being kind of like, oh, what's going to happen today? Oh my God, how am I going to get there? How am I going to do this? Like the kind of stress of logistics seems to be more, forward looking with Mercury morning star versus evening star. And that's just something I've kind of sussed out talking to people, because I didn't really know how to delineate that. So I started asking like about mercurial things with people and finding it seemed to kind of relate to which direction their anxiety was looking.
Ooh, I love that. And I've never thought of that before, but that totally makes sense. And isn't that kind of a little bit of a difference too between, isn't like anxiety, like worry about the future, and depression is worry about the past, which kind of also maybe as an extension makes sense, because I feel like evening Mercury could maybe be more depressed than like anxious daytime Mercury.
Sure.
Thinking about like daytime, like anxiety and depression having like lunar solar qualities.
Oh yeah, I mean it's all comorbid, as they say. These things are all kind of often tied up together, right?
Yeah.
You often get, the same symptoms with certain things, but they express themselves differently. And yeah, that would be interesting to kind of ask around in your practice or in our practices what that means to people, because you can kind of really tell what mercurial things are, right? Like, what am I thinking about? Where am I moving things in my life? Where are my logistics brain going? What is my what is stressing me out? Mercury can be a very stressful planet. All of that activity and buzz, taxes, all that adrenaline needed to operate on a mercurial level can tax the body.
Yeah. What kind of, I sort of started with this big introduction to you as my Mercury avatar friend, but when you're sitting with
Tell them what I am. I'm a Gemini sun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Good one. Yes.
So
Gemini.
Taurus moon, Capricorn rising, but the Gemini sun is in the 6th. So, do what you want with that.
Where's your Mercury?
With the sun in Gemini on Pleiades. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Your brain, you'll like, anyway.
My brain is on other things, according to my chart. My brain's in another place. It's also opposite Neptune, so bye. I'm just out there.
My Mercury square Neptune, so I totally feel you. But also, Neptune has been on my Mercury for like ever.
But I love Mercury in Pisces. It's kind of like having Mercury in Pisces with square Neptune is kind of like having a cabinet of rivals, where you're just kind of getting a lot of attention on this kind of one area, right? Because I love that symmetry of Pisces and Neptune together. So I like kind of when they're in aspects to other things in there, because they have really interesting expressions.
I was thinking about this earlier today, how like I'm a pretty sober person. I always have been. Like I've never been a drinker. I don't smoke pot or anything. But people have like always thought
Soda.
Soda, you're like as I'm drinking. But people have always thought that like I used to work retail, and people would always like, call into my managers and be like, she's so stoned on the job all the time. And I was like, what are they talking about? And then I realized I'm just like naturally spacey.
Naturally spacey. Is that what you would say Neptune square Mercury is? Just kind of spacey?
Yeah.
I like that.
So, okay.
But what is so then where is Neptune? Is it in Gemini or it's in Sag?
It's in Sag.
Yeah, because I forget we are in that generation together.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to get to the bigger question, because I kind of wanted to ask about what you look to Mercury to see in charts, because again, not everyone who's listening to this is an astrologer, but maybe I'm going to like go back further. You've been an astrologer. I feel like we're one of those people that have had like astrology in your life pretty significantly from an early age. Same with magic, and both are still big parts of your life. Which came first? How did they enter? We're gonna go back and get the whole like Travis Black story here.
Okay. Like Jennifer Coolidge in White Lotus, where she's like, I was born in San Francisco. We lived in a house. Yeah, so they arrived at the same time. astrology and magic in the form of Twin Peaks. In the finale in June 1991, I have a chart for it somewhere. They were talking about, they found this like map in like the cave, like the cool cave or whatever, and they had to like decode it because that's going to solve the whole thing or whatever, the whole mystery. And they talked about these astrological symbols of Jupiter and Saturn and how they were in conjunction, and that when the two planets were in conjunction, that there was great shifts in fortune, both good and bad. All these kind of interesting delineations. They had somebody like writing this that knew what they were doing. And so I was like, oh my God, planets can open a portal, right? I'm just like, this is what this whole show is about. These planets conjunct or in conjunction. That opened a portal to this like other place that you would see, as we see in the David Lynch kind of stuff, the red drapes and the zigzag floor. That is the place that the Jupiter Saturn in conjunction open. And you have to think about this from a David Lynch perspective. He's looking at it from Vedic because he is TM and Maharishi and all that stuff. So it's a whole other like ball of wax. I didn't quite understand that yet. So I went to Astrology et al. In Seattle when I was a kid. Like this is like, I think it was like 13.
Okay.
And I was like talking about Twin Peaks and planets and opening portals and stuff. And Mama Nalbandian, she just handed me or gave me or showed me this book on planetary magic, which I might have. I still have the same copy. Yeah, here it is. Planetary Magic.
Wow. Okay.
And it was completely nonsensical. I had no idea. But there was these cool pictures in there. So I was like, oh, great. I'm into this, right? So I kind of would hang this stuff in my room or whatever. So this is essentially like a lot of different stuff about correspondences and altars and sigils and workings and Kabbalistic tree of life stuff. And it's still kind of over my head, a lot of it, but what I understand it to be now is this kind of their own kind of recipe book for planetary magic based on just kind of general 20th century lodge magic, right? So it gave me an idea of what I was looking at and what form of magic could be. And so I didn't really like do much with it though, but I got to understand, or I had to start astrology and magic both from that place, and they kind of went on separate paths because I didn't know about astrological magic until like I heard Austin Coppock talking about it in on Rune Soup like 6 years ago or something. Wow. And I was like, oh, what is this guy talking about? And I was like, oh, that book. And I kind of put it together, but I'd never thought about it, done anything with it. In all the years I was doing kind of a very much modern astrology, psychological way. And so understanding planetary magic meant I had to go through formal traditional astrological education in order to access these pieces in here. And so that's the kind of circuitous route I took and am taking. I'm still kind of doing it.
Yeah. That's always fascinating to me because sometimes I feel, I mean, we haven't spoken in a while, but you're one of these people to me. It's like you're a brilliant astrologer. And very much, I mean, I know, but I feel like in many ways you were just like self-taught for years and years and years, and then kind of went back to the traditional stuff. And it's always interesting because I think you're very humble when you talk about yourself as an astrologer, because I think, maybe, I don't know, like the traditionals may be different, but it's not like between that book and hearing Austin, there was a lot in between, right? There was like a full astrological practice you had built up. And I would say there's also was some magic too, if perhaps not astrological magic.
Oh yeah, I mean, there was nothing but. I've been seeking occult remedies for my whole life. But yeah, I fell into chaos magic as it was what all the cool goth kids were doing.
Okay.
And so I just, I knew that. It was just around. So it was never kind of not a part of my life. It was always in these kind of circles since a young age. I've interfaced with all kinds of magical traditions, whether it be through, Tibetan Buddhism or Sufism, or, you know, I've kind of, as I've traveled and studied across the world, I've just kind of gathered lots of things.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of, it just kind of assembled itself through all those different people who I spoke to about all this stuff, but it never really, I mean, I guess I read all those like Liz Green and Howard Suspordis books, but that was tough. Like, it was still kind of modern, always had a troubling sense to me of victim blaming. And, you know, this is a hot topic, I feel. And, you know, I was watching this evolutionary astrology. What evolutionary astrology is now is very much how modern felt when I was coming up in the 90s and early 2000s. It's kind of how it felt, the same kind of vibe. It's kind of spiritual and new agey, and they seem like they're kind of making it all up. But I was watching this evolutionary astrology. I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but I was watching a video of how the whole thing was about an introduction to it, and how like everything they were basically doing was like victim blaming. And then they basically had a slide of how to explain to people that they weren't victim blaming. And I was like, I don't know, y'all, this is really sus. And so that's kind of how I felt about modern, was that it didn't account for the bad things in my life. It didn't account for the big, dark, the traumas with the capital T's. It was just like, no, you're fine. It's really okay. And so the combination of those things really kept astrology at arm's distance, because I didn't like it. I didn't like the flavor of it. I felt like I had to use it because there was correspondences and stuff. And it was, you know, just a part of everything. And it is a useful way to organize occult philosophy and practice.
Sure.
But as like I'm reading a chart for somebody, I just didn't start doing that till like 2017. But, you know, also it just depends who you ask. Like, there are people who they've never seen me at astrology conferences until a few years ago, and they're like, you're brand new to this. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. So there's the social hierarchy of astrologers who can very much determine, are you an astrologer or not, by how you're placed in that. And there's people like us who are kind of out there doing it in the background and asking questions and interface. And I've had in-person clients for all of my work. I do lots of kind of in-person work. And you know, I test these things, and I've been testing them on my clients since the mid 90s.
Okay, so just to go back, and that's what I assumed. You said you didn't start doing charts. Like, do you mean traditional reading of charts since 2017? Because like you've had crazy stories about. God, you kind of ran away. Am I getting this right? You kind of grew up on your own pretty quick. You had a sort of tumultuous childhood, and you used to tell. I'm not gonna. You have these really interesting stories of maybe being on tour with certain people and reading charts. I mean, it was like these fascinating stories. You have a robust life. So you've been reading charts for people, since the 90s. Is that correct?
Yeah. You're speaking of Courtney Love, My Summer with Courtney. Do you ever see that movie, My Summer with Marilyn? This movie about this guy who had this affair with Marilyn Monroe over a summer, and it was very brief. Courtney and I did not have an affair, but when she knows who you are and she latches onto you, you cannot get rid of her. So she taught me a lot about cinema, astrology, and she had a computer and with like internet on it. And like this is like 95, summer of 95. I'm touring with them, and she had internet access. And so her and like the band, and we'd sit around talking about astrology and the houses, and was really obsessed with Saturn because they're all having like Saturn returns or something.
Yeah, that makes sense, because their second Saturn return now. Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Sorry, side note, but go on. So they were internet 1995.
But she pulled up my chart on something, and I'm trying to find out what it was, because I don't know what websites were around then. But I remember she had AOL. She had this old MacBook or whatever it was called. And anyway, she pulled it up somehow, and they were like talking about it, and like olive hole, delineating my chart. I had no idea I have no recollection of the details of it, but I remember that I suddenly was like, oh, this is way more complicated than I thought. Plus, cool people do this. And they're also like super like intelligent. These weren't just like the average kind of musicians. These are like hyper intelligent Mensa individuals, you know.
How old were you? Because you were pretty young.
I was 17.
Wow. And what were you doing on tour?
I was just like production support, which meant just carrying Courtney Love. Hi, Courtney. But she was great. She would tell me about, she taught me about AIDS conspiracy theories, astrology, and cinema. It was the summer of my, last summer of my youth and the first summer of my adulthood. It was like an almost famous kind of dream. And I met everybody. Oh my God, I met Sinead O'Connor. I met, she was on that tour for a while. Yeah, it was like I suddenly found myself face to face with lots of people who were very famous, and it was really difficult first few days. It was very stressful, but yeah, the astrology became something that a lot of them talked about, and so I started to like it is a way to ease up social anxiety, and I was like, oh, I can talk to them about astrology. I had no idea what I was talking about, but yeah, to go to your questions before, like that was kind of what jump started my like interest in it, was seeing people really doing it or talking about it, and that they were like interesting, and maybe incorporating it into their work and such. But I had some chart readings in the late 90s in Seattle that really troubled me, because they were really accurate in a way that it had never been accurate, and suddenly it was really real. And it saw the like dark stuff, as you kind of spoke of.
Mm-hmm.
So that scared me, and I put it away for a good 4 years, over like Y2K, I guess.
Yeah.
And then it was difficult to keep around. And then I wasn't reading charts, but I didn't know how. And I was having them read for me by all kinds of crazy people, but I wasn't like doing that. I had other clients. I don't know if we can talk about that on this.
You can talk whatever you want, by the way. You're comfortable. You and I are friends off this. So if I allude to things, it's me saying, I don't want to divulge too much, but you're welcome to share as much as you want. We could talk about anything here.
Yeah, just because I don't want to go too into it, but yeah, I was an escort for many decades. And so a lot of my clients, I would get their sign.
Yeah.
And I would see what that meant. And that meant I was limited to sun signs, but I would use that to screen my clients a lot. So eventually I would kind of look up charts online, but if I could get their birth info, but that was usually only from like regular people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was generally very weary of Mars ruled people or suns.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, sun signs became very important to me because it was all I had to work with for my safety. And so you really have to learn how people refract their identity to themselves to get an idea of the kind of person you're working with. And so you can poo-poo sun signs all you want, but I relied on them for a long time. So yeah, that's how I was kind of getting a lot of my astrological information, was just seeing what people were like, their sun signs. Sometimes I can get a moon, sometimes a rising, but it was rare occasion. And if I can get their chart, an even rarer occasion. But I started to see that there were, where certain problems were in synastry, and where potential danger was, Mars and Cancer. Often, in my experience, not to shit on Mars and Cancer people, but it reinforces the Mars and Cancer reinforces the idea that men, when they're at their most vulnerable, are also at their most violent. And so that placement has expressed itself to me, and I've noted that. And so these are the kind of bits and pieces I was operating with. I wasn't reading charts, but I was getting intel, and that's kind of what fed me to do astrology more professionally, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I studied with Austin, and that helped me kind of organize it all.
Yeah.
And get me on the traditional track. But it was a long, circuitous route, and now I really have a hard time with modern.
So what's really interesting to me is that even though you're reticent about modern, right? You still, with whatever tools you had, you found an astrology that made sense for you, or that you made an astrology work for you. that is what I think is like so beautiful, right? That even though maybe there's things you didn't like, you're like, okay, this is how I'm going to make astrology work for me. And it seems like it really did. It seems like it maybe saved your life in some instances.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I'm a huge skeptic. And so the fact that astrology survived 30 years plus years in my life means I've really put it through the ringer. I've really tested it, and I've really looked at it from every angle, and it's still here, and it's more serious now, which means that it is helpful. And I use it with my clients to help them right now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help you right now. I want the alleviation of suffering with this. How do we do that? And there's lots of ways to go in on that. And that's something I don't get from modern, or haven't in a way that I've found yet. It's just a lot of, it doesn't seem to get to the heart of it like this does.
So we're going to get just, warning for anyone who's listening to this and you're not into astrology, you're probably listening to the wrong podcast. At any rate, let's just kind of jump into it. When you started studying traditional with Austin, was that your first traditional teacher? Yes. Okay. Yeah. What about it really, like, when you say, like, what grasped you? Right. Because you said that, modern sort of didn't do it, but this sort of new technique is what really helped you. So how do you use what do you like about traditional astrology, and how does it help you with your client work?
Yeah, that's interesting. If modern is wet, traditional is very dry.
Okay.
And like that, I can work with that. Dry 8th house, Mars and Saturn and Leo.
Yeah.
So like tell it to me like it is, please. Tell it to me. Just tell it to me like it is. Don't waste my time. Don't enrich me with emotion. Don't set me up. Don't manipulate me into feeling something. Just give it to me. And that's what traditional does. And it may not, because it relies heavily on there being other forces at work that may not have your best interest. That alone made me feel incredibly seen, and in ways that modern was always like, no, but she's your mother, and traditional is like, well, that's your mother. It's very, and Austin speaks in that way. He's, he speaks like a, philosophy professor, which he is, in ways, but there is an incredible accessibility to it. And he just speaks really the same age, or I'm a little older, and he speaks my language, and that's what it takes. And it just, no matter who you are, it doesn't matter what phone you use, if it just matters that you understand how it works, and he understands how he works. And it's like a camera. Who cares if you use Sony or Canon? Just, do you get the menu system? I get the menu system. That's traditional. Is like, the menu system. There's, Demetra's like endless supply of dry activities if you need it, which please me to no end. And that's what I can get at, is it's just, you too can replicate this chart delineation by using traditional astrology. You take one chart to 5 different modern, you're going to get like 20 different chart readings. It's like what they say, 2 rabbis, 3 opinions.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about modern. Whereas, and this is just my gross generalization. This is just how it's had meaning in my life.
Sure.
My ways I've moved through it. So this is, unique to me. But yeah, it's just more matter of fact. You can objectively look at a chart, and someone else can come up with the same delineation. I find great power in that with my clients, when they can look at that and see that for themselves, or take it to somebody else and be like, yeah, that was the general kind of gist of it. I like that there's a bit of a standard for that. Yeah. And it provides that for me, that, I can send, and I work with mostly men, so they seem to require a lot of that, proof, let's call it, right? Substance, that they can see that for themselves. And so a lot of it with my, male clients is I'm trying to teach them too. I teach them about astrology while they read their chart. They often get it.
I think the reason I was grasping struggling with that question so much is because I never really, I got into astrology, I suppose, through some modern astrologers, but I didn't start studying until I started studying traditional. So that's like my only entrance into it. So for like those who just like do not, and I think actually many people are probably like this, right? They learned the 7 traditional planets. To me, I like, you know, traditional astrology is like very like brass tacks. Like it's here, this is how it is. Let's talk. Let's move forward. But can you maybe this is a little bit of astrology history I'm leaning on you for. Can you like maybe describe what the modern astrology movement is for people who have no idea what we're talking about? Just, it can be crude.
Well, I can speak to the ones I've interfaced with. Modern astrology, as I know it, started with like Linda Goodman, and it kind of branches out from there.
Okay.
Sun signs, right? It was, the flavor I got into was like the boomer, late 60s, Summer of Love, Maharishi, Beatles, that kind of Manson family, Rosemary's Baby era of boomer kind of occultism. They were like into Anton LaVey, but they were like in Buddhist retreats. Like they're just kind of like just consuming all of these spiritual traditions.
Yeah.
And kind of making some crazy stew out of it, right? So that, I was in a weird cult that did that. And I have a real bone to pick with that approach to everything, because they kind of just made it all up. I feel like all of modern astrology is just like, I don't know. It's really hard to look back on, because a lot of it I can't trace it, and it's often stuff like, I'm a Gemini, I like Kool-Aid, therefore Geminis like Kool-Aid. It's just a lot of that kind of stuff. And so where it kind of starts for me and the people who knew astrology as I was growing up was that. Okay. And so that meant that they were really into Jung, and they're into like, psychology, and they're into psychotherapy. They're going to psychotherapists, right? They're reading Jacques Lacan. They're reading Freud. They're reading Worse, who is Freud's nephew, the guy who did, what's his name? Edward Bernays.
Okay.
Yeah, he kind of invented what we think of as modern PR. So they're kind of
okay. Oh, yeah.
Mass indoctrination and how psychology works. And it was just a very bizarre time that they were looking to, I don't know, it seemed like astrological information and all of that, and less in extant sources. And there was very little linking it. Maybe William Lilly, maybe, others, but I don't know. There was a lot of Dane Rudhyar around. There was a lot of Linda Goodman. There was a lot of, then of course in the 90s, like Liz Green and Howard Suspordis. That was really all the books I ever saw in astrology. Yeah. And so I didn't know, maybe planets in transit, stuff like that. I didn't know more than those names, because those were only names on the shelf in those bookstores. I mean, unless you went to the Astrology et al. Bookstore in Seattle, I wouldn't even know where to start there either. But a lot of it was just seemingly just the same kind of new age stuff cloaked in other speak. And so it just was a turnoff.
I can imagine. I mean, the age of, and by the way, we are not trashing all of these astrologers. We're just trying to like.
Because it's on the sounds. I feel.
No. I'm just putting that that out there, because
these are people I put a lot of investment in, and a lot of interest, and a lot of trust. And then seeing how others just kind of like any spiritual thing, people just don't know what they're doing, and they just ruin stuff for you. You get that one bad yoga teacher, you're like, oh shit, I hate yoga now. And I had a lot of really bad astrology readings too. And not only like interesting ones, but like, oh my God, what? Even recently there was a famous astrologer last year I got a reading from, and they just talked about asteroids the whole time. And I was like, this is not what I wanted. But they were just like, it was just like making it all up. And I was like, are you on drugs? What is going on with you people? You can say anything.
It's interesting. So I'm going to touch on two things. One, to be fair, I would like to make this PSA that you can also get really bad readings from very knowledgeable traditional astrologers who go in the other route that are just like, you're fucked, have fun, right? Like sometimes they get like two in their head. But so when we talk about modern astrology, okay, cookbook astrology is what I really think about. And I can imagine like when you're a young person, especially like you're going through some difficult shit and like maybe like very outside the sort of mainstream, right? Like those books can be pretty like depressing and unrelatable. It's either like, this is awesome, or yeah, like this signification, you're cursed, have a good day. So I can imagine like there being some, I don't know, just from your own like personal worldview, a needing for more complexity there.
It needed more complexity, but with a coherent structure. Some of these things these like self-published things you would find at New Age bookstores and stuff, just people are rambling, about New Age stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, And that's kind of where I, like to rib evolutionary, because it's kind of the same thing. It's like, can you just like wrap it up? Can you just tell me what you're getting at here? That's because something's hiding in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of like they don't know something, or when people, I guess I just don't vibe on a lot of when people rely too much on intuition.
Yeah.
For a reading, I need a little bit more technical validity in myself, because that's where spiritual abuse happens and spiritual neglect happens, and that's where a lot of people. I mean, why are all these kids now drawn to traditional astrology? It's not just because it exists. It's because perhaps, I wonder, as we meet them and talk with them at the conferences, if they felt the same about modern, that it just didn't speak to them, and it spoke to like a frequency of a whole other thing. And these kids are like, oh my God, I need help now.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, as Neptune was in Pisces, and as the generations become perhaps more desperate, that it's interesting to see what they turn to for guidance.
God, I mean, this brings up a whole other set of questions. I was like thinking about AI and the ability of like what it means when you can sort of delineate, right? Like, is it CoStar that has their sort of fortune telling machine in New York? Have you heard of this?
Mm-hmm.
It's like some sort of machine, and it gives like horoscopes. It's this AI machine, right? And so like on one hand, we're like, okay, cool. Like there are things that we can delineate, but this brings us up into a whole other conversation about where the sort of divination happens. Okay. Which is a whole topic, but I'm going to go back and ask you a different question. You can kind of let that marinate in your head.
I like that.
We're talking about, right, like, okay, like this sort of discomfort with modern astrology, yet you still studied and practiced astrology. You still practiced astrology. When you were in that like hotel room with Courtney Love and her friends, right? These like highly intelligent people, were you getting something from them that you weren't getting from those books that didn't speak to you? Like, how did they talk about astrology?
In multidisciplinary language. We're talking about Umberto Eco. They're talking about cinema, right? They're talking about Cassavetes. Drew Barrymore was there. I mean, they were because she was dating the guitarist. I mean, they were giving it life.
Yeah.
And some astrology Twitter can be so exhausting because it's just this endless parade of non sequiturs of astrology. It's so there's no life to it for me.
Yeah.
And that is important. And I think that is one thing about, we can link this to the AI, is as far as we know, machines don't have consciousness, and consciousness is the thing that affects change in this universe.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness determines if Schrodinger's cat is alive or dead. Consciousness determines if light is a wave or a particle. We will likely always have that in a way computers won't. And I think that's the key to the divination, right? And I think because we can have used our consciousness through all kinds of different experiences, that the consciousness is what we trade in, and therefore that's where we can access all this stuff. our own intelligence and knowledge and awareness, whereas a computer can just kind of mine data.
Yeah.
That we have access to these lived things that, you know, that hotel room in Wenatchee at the Red Lion with Hole, and I still have the key card from that in my scrapbook. But that tells me something. That's a delineation of itself, that we were there on a certain time and date, and I have a chart for that. So I can tell how my life was unfolding because of certain events like that. But I was putting consciousness on something, hyper consciousness, because of who I was with, right?
Yeah.
These super solar people, talk about being combust in all directions. But these things, that's how you learn and let it breathe, is to think about it in this way, and think about each other as planets and situations, as aspects, and conversations as, communion, in a true sense, a communion. I don't think that's something AI can ever achieve, consciousness and communion. And that has been, with my decades being a sex worker, I mean, I'm literally of the flesh in a way that computers cannot. And I think that there's more consciousness and touch. And that consciousness, you can't delineate that. The only thing that can delineate that is a human brain consciousness. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And, I was like, my very non sequitur brain, I was thinking when you were talking about that, is just like the very act of like human to human interaction and conversation, how that is so vital to astrology. Like, I often think that to be a good astrologer and to be a good reader are two very separate talents. Like, I think there's a lot of astrologers that are brilliant, but we're in a world full of shut-ins, right? I know a lot of astrologers who are really like heady, but they don't really know how to talk to people. And if you're going to make your living sitting, holding space for people, being able to interact with people is really, really important. And so it's interesting to think that perhaps your first teachers were, the members of Whole in that room, and how that sort of carries you maybe that was the beginning of your life lessons as a reader.
Yeah. That's really if you're out there, hi. I gotta say hi.
Thanks for listening.
They're really amazing people. Yeah, I certainly, astrology made a good first impression, but I'd already been fans of these people and reading about them, philosophizing about it for years already.
Yeah.
I was already in. But yeah, the conversations, I don't know about you, but the readings were, I look at the chart the least, and kind of ask the most questions, and when that flows effortlessly, that seems to be a good reading. And so you can delineate all you want.
Yeah.
Moon and whatever, doesn't matter. Sure. I mean, anybody can do that. People are even beginning to write like AI, which is a whole other like thing. There's people sound like they're AI. I'm like, why are you wrote that? Yeah, why? You're proud of it? God, we're gonna have to edit this.
No, it's great. One of my astrology mentor, Larry Arrington, God bless her, when she said the other day, she's like, it's great. I just hope AI replaces all these sort of useless, just there's so much fluff that you're inundated with. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't need the like play-by-play of every fucking transit, like every moment of the day. And you're like,
I don't
AI
know
can
where the moon is right now.
Huh?
I don't even know where the moon is right now.
And I think it's good to forget sometimes. And I think so. Just idea that AI can replace that, but what it can't replace is the human skill, and we can maybe all move on to something that's a little more enriching with our lives. I mean, talking about like ancients, I don't think, I don't know, God bless, like Valens, every moment of the day was just like, do you know where, I mean, I'm sure he knew where the moon was, but like, wasn't this such play by play? It's very exhausting.
I like happy accidents to happen.
Yeah.
I like, I like for things to occur on their own. I like for things, fate to bump up against it. I don't mind living in that mix of it. But if I'm looking at what the rising sign is, where the moon is, and what's in the 8th or whatever, I'm I don't know. That's a hard way to live. I find that astrology makes my life better when I just kind of let it seep in through remediation, through communion, like we're talking about, through learning about other things that maybe can be allied. The more I kind of am on the outside of the chart, the happier I am. Not that I can't, I don't need the structure of that to operate. I do, but it's more than the chart's just a beginning. I mean, there's so many which ways that astrology can make your life better. I don't know why holding yourself to transits would ever help relieve anxiety or make anything better. It's like I would go insane, but I'm a Capricorn rising.
See, I think that's great that I picked this chart. So we're kind of contradicting ourselves, right? So we opened this up saying, man, we've elected a bad chart because I'm forgetting about the chart. So there are moments. So we're not saying we don't look at charts. We do, especially you, because you work with elections, right? Like you practice astrological magic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, elections are important to me, and I certainly use them for bigger things. I'm not going to use it for sending an email. I just don't need that. I have other things going in other ways. If it's like, okay, maybe it's something really important, like, okay, I have to like pitch a screenplay to somebody or something, let's say, I may, if it's something like that. But I don't know, I'm more inclined to lean on the kind of the crystal castle of the existence of living in astrology, that everything I have is so zinging with astrological energy around me. And I kind of arrange it so that certain things can happen no matter kind of what chart is going on. Which is just me looking for stability mostly in my life. But I will use elections for big stuff, not the little stuff. I'll use the like planetary day and hour for most of my workings.
Yeah.
That's enough.
I think that maybe we forget, or maybe I forget sometimes that I have to remind myself that astrology is a tool. At least that's how I view it, right? So like tarot is a tool, astrology is a tool. It's not like a lifestyle. I mean, it consumes a lot of our lives, but these are tools with very specific purposes, which is, a good way of maybe thinking like maybe an introduction to like, you aren't just an astrologer, right? I mean, you've done so many things. You're a writer. I know you're in school now. I didn't even ask like what
I'm always in school. I'll be in school forever. I'm working on a long-term plan. I'll just say that.
Can we know what you're studying right now?
Right now I'm doing this trigger point therapy stuff, which is pretty cool.
Okay. I knew that that's been a long school.
This weekend I'm actually doing the heart touch method, which is a form of kind of death doula massage, where I will be working on people who are dying of cancer all weekend and providing or kind of learning massage on them, with them, in kind of a palliative care setting. And so that essentially learning how to massage people who are on their deathbed is the training this weekend I'm doing. Wow. And so that is, a lot of sex workers when they retire, because I retired, they end up in death doula work because of our ability to handle bodies in all forms and all states. I've seen it all. And so I can do that. And, somebody defecating in a diaper is not a big deal. I used to charge for that. But now it's, but, now it's serious. And it's like, oh, I can handle this because we can. And I think I'm uniquely qualified for that. So a lot of my stuff is leaning towards elder stuff. I'm also Saturn ruled in the 8th house. So, I'm interested in especially providing care for gay men who are dying as well, like finding some kind of connection where I can be of service in that way. So yeah, I do lots of things, and this is how I kind of test my astrology out, right? And it's important to talk about magic and the scheduling of stuff and the days, because I prescribe people remediation, and it needs to be something that they will do. If you start giving them a chart and this and that, the time, and get up and do that, like, they're not going to do it. But if you're like, every Thursday at sunrise, get up and say the Orphic to Jupiter, or do a little meditation on, Jupiter, with the color, the whatever, the metal, they'll do that. That's why planetary day and hour is useful, because I just tell everybody to do something at sunrise on that day, because it's always the same hour.
Yeah.
At sunrise, and everyone can knows when sunrise is happening. And so this is the stuff, this is where astrology comes off the chart, and this is where it's outside, because you have to get off of that. This is how people actually interface with it. And if you come to it through a love of the devotional kind of religious magical side of it, like I do, this can be a real practice. And so just getting people in the habit of doing something that they can do, it's just kind of like sprinkling a little paganism in their life, and it generally kind of makes things better. But I'm doing all that I can when I'm working with these people to get information on what they're doing, what their interests are, what life events are happening, what things have befalled them, which things that they've reached for, where they come from, where they're going. I ask all these questions, and I get a lot of different answers, and I can piece that together with some of the astrology I've learned. But it is really about people looking for help and care where they have been totally failed by the system. And at the margins of that are always kind of charlatans making up fucking shit. And that's why I shit on some of that modern stuff, is because it was unhelpful to me at times when I was ill.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're not sick. You're just identifying with it too much. And it's like, oh my God, 76 house, shut up. I get it, but like, not helpful. So it talked down to me in a time where I needed it. So I want to give people something that they can use when they've tried everything else, when doctors are like, you're crazy, there's nothing going on, that there are things that they can look to. I can just be a source of like, hey, I'm kind of grounded over here. I'm not trying to like be a clown on Instagram. I'm not trying to like do any of that. I'm just kind of like want to give you the basics and have you do the basics well. Of a consciousness practice. I'm probably doing a nutritionist training after this, right? Because I want to be able to come to me with everything that UCLA or whoever turned you away from, and maybe I can help you piece something together on the margins. And that's really how I see myself, as like a de facto grounded kind of like medicine man of sorts.
Wow. I mean, it's so fascinating to think about, right? Like, you grew up very much in the margins, right? I mean, tell me if I'm right, but you've been on your own since you were like early teenage years. Am I getting your story correct here?
Yeah, I left home. I was put into the cult when I was like 13 or 14. Okay. And I was there for a while, and then I tried to emancipate myself from all kinds of things. But yeah, I eventually lived on the streets of Seattle for a long time. I was homeless. My own private Idaho was very much like my life at that time, that portrait of Seattle and Portland. So yeah, then eventually I kind of found my way to punk houses. Yeah. And then punk houses in Seattle and punk houses in Olympia, where they were a lot more fun and a lot cheaper, and there was a lot of free live music. But then by that point I was an adult, and then by the time I turned 18, Olympia, I moved to New York City.
And you studied film, just a side note, right? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah.
Your story is so wild. But and one day I will sit down and get it all from you. But it's interesting to think about the fact that you very much, it's interesting, like grew up on the margins, but had to like, I think, yeah, I can tell me if I'm not being accurate at all. But it's like you saw what you were seeking, right? In some ways wasn't out there. Maybe in that room with Hole, you got like a glimpse of it, but it feels like you really
love that room with Hole. Painting of just us sitting around a laptop looking at the charts and give it to you for your birthday.
So good. But it feels like for like so much of your life, you were just kind of like out there, like trying to like grasp and find it out for yourself. Like, I love the fact that you were like not into sun sign astrology, like, oh, this isn't helping me. But then you put it to the test. Like, you made sun sign astrology work for you. And then it seems in some ways like maybe when you finally found traditional astrology, there was this thing of like this deepening. And it's interesting that kind of coincided with your own retirement, right? And so it feels like now you've kind of had this like life moment where you can now maybe be the source of grounding for people. Well, actually, like, tell me if this is right. Do you kind of see yourself as maybe that person you wished you had found during those younger years?
Yeah. Just level with me. Someone to be like, look, I've tried this stuff. I don't think that works. Here's what I'm trying. You should see for yourself and ask around about it. Hey, try it, see, experiment. Not like, you know, this is a silver bullet. This is going to fix you. There's a lot of that shit. When you're vulnerable and hurting and in pain and suffering, or you don't have money, you don't have any chances at that. And so it is my hope to be just like, hey, you're not into me. You don't like what I do. Then, you know, cool. Don't do it. If you're into it, great. Let's do it. And I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to, you know, hopefully come from a place of lived experience and not just, oh, this herb works because I read about it. But no, I tried that. Actually, I tried taking saw palmetto for a year, and I still had the same prostate problems. Yeah. Right? That's kind of where my life is at. Is like I know these things now, and I've heard about that, and I've asked about that, and that is worth something to somebody somewhere. And that's my hope. That just I don't need the whole crowd. I just need the right crowd. And that if I can have that, I would be very satisfied in life. And I kind of have that. I've had clients for the same clients for decades.
Wow.
And they're just in my life. And so if I can just kind of add to that a little bit more, so I can live comfortably in the islands in Washington State or something by myself on a yurt farm and have a naked queer commune, a bunch of stray dogs. It's my dream. Then yeah, that's all I need. And so I hope that the right people find me and that they're willing to partake in what I have to dispense.
This is perfect timing, because I know we're about at our hour and you have some things to go to. So what is your practice now? How can people find you? Are you taking new clients?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bathhouse Mystic on all social platforms and bathhousemystic.com. Your tarot, astrology, bodywork, crystal healing, Reiki, all kinds of things. Just come tell me what's wrong and see how I can help.
There are no parents, no other adults, no one to interfere with the fun.
I saw that a lot in the Twin Peaks fan community, where like everyone who's amazing artists just making fan art. And it's like, why just make your art? It's great, you know, but there's, it's material to work through. It's experience, it's practice. People end up doing it. I get it. But I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I just think of like planetary tapestries and like just random spiritual poached imagery. And again, I think of like, you know, like Leonora Carrington, and just there is this sort of rich, you know, reference of artists dealing with this sort of subject. Anyway, I think as a group of people, we think about aesthetics way less than we should, personally.
Yes. Okay. Aesthetics. I misunderstood the question or the topic then, because yeah, the aesthetics are, well, aesthetics in goth circles are just telling you what tribe you're in.
Yeah.
And the details don't matter, it seems.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah. The aesthetics, I mean, God, growing up in Seattle, it's the Utila kilt with the purple hair and the like Dead Moon t-shirt. Like burned in my retina. It was like every guy when I was growing up in the 90s was that guy. It's like, oh my God, you all love Dead Moon. We get it. Can you Slater Kinney, anyone else, please? Yeah, and the socks and the Birkenstocks. It's still very much, I mean, you go to NORWAC, you see some of that. I'm not gonna lie.
I know.
I'm from there, I can say that. But yeah, the aesthetics, but then there's people who are totally like high fashion, cool kids wearing their like nice, Italian loafers. And it's like, okay, there's a few of you here.
I appreciate you. I see you.
I see you. I was just wearing the same, like someone asked me if I was the Uber delivery guy. Well, you're wearing all black and you have Adidas pants on. I thought you were it's like, no, I'm here for the party. I'm not here to deliver food. Thank you. So I have to like get a new look next year. They thought I was like the Armenian delivery guy, which is a real look in LA. It's a real comfortable look. But yes, I do dress like that apparently. So I'm gonna work on my style. Plus, I've lost some weight, so I can fit into my old jeans again.
God bless you. I mean, you're always so fit. And by the way, I should preface this that I'm not like on some sort of like, I can't think of words like soapbox here. Like I basically wear goth pajamas every day. So I just was making a.
Even your hands have outfits. I love how you called it your hand outfit.
Oh yeah, I do have hand outfits. I appreciate that. But no, I was just kind of making a sort of funny sort of throwaway remark about, man, in the astro sort of occult community, can we really up our aesthetic style because it can get really drab in here.
I know. There's some guy at this magical guy at NORWAC this year wearing like a Seahawks t-shirt and like shorts, and I go to hug him and he's just covered in talismans on both sides of his body, and I was like, what, you're wearing a Seahawks shirt? No talisman can help that.